Hello everybody, video here for you today. This is the retro no cap recap of the Curse of Oak Island season 7 premiere 2-hour episode 1 called The Torch is Passed. Originally aired November 5th, 2019. If you missed any of my recaps of previous and future episodes, there's a link to my Oak Island playlist in the upper right. Let's get into it. Boo doo doo doo. Previously on the Curse of Oak Island, people have been looking for an incredible treasure for 229 years. The 7th season begins on a somber note as we learn that Dan Blankenship has passed during the show hiatus. Dan spent the majority of his life on Oak Island trying to solve the mystery. Dan is who originally found the U-shaped structure in Smith's Cove in the early 1970s that was unearthed again by the Laguna team the previous season in 2018. The Lagunas sent wood samples from all of the structures they uncovered in Smith's Cove to receive dendrochronology analysis, and they were all determined to be at minimum 20 years older than the 1795 discovery of the Money Pit. Dan spent most of his time on the island on borehole 10X. It is located north of the Women's Memorial / Garden Shaft to the right of the white building at the top of this image. The Laguna team put this plaque at borehole 10X as a memorial to Dan Blankenship in a later season. A few days before Dan's passing during the show's hiatus, the team got the results of the seismic data testing in the swamp. The biggest anomaly was this ship-shaped object, 200 feet long, 25 feet wide at one end, and 40 feet wide at the other. Metal detection expert Gary Drayton confirms that those measurements are consistent with Spanish galleons. Rick says they are in the process of getting both drilling and swamp excavation permits. They will have local diver Tony Sampson do some preliminary checking on certain areas. They will also follow up on Smith's Cove, moving the sheet piling dam out another 50 feet since the slipway ran right up to the dam. They hope to find the slipway and any other structures that might be further out in the water. Marty and Gary thinks it's possible that the lead cross he and Rick found in 2017 fell into the cove from hillside erosion. Due to the harsh winter storms the area gets that could move artifacts, Gary checks the beach all the way around the island every year. He will also check the hill. Later at the swamp, Tony arrives and says it will be easier to move around with the water level being higher with the recent heavy rainfall. 3 years prior, Tony found an 18-foot long deck plank, carbon dated as early as the late 1500s. This is a reverse angle view of the swamp showcasing the triangle shape. Surveyor Steve Guptill points out the ship-shaped anomaly to Tony. It is near the edge of the Fred Nolan-built peninsula. In 1969, he became convinced that the swamp was the key to solving the mysteries of Oak Island. He found several pieces of a ship, including part of a mast, as well as many survey markers. He believed that there was once 2 islands, and a ship sailed between them and was purposely sunk and then buried. He further believed that coffer dams were built at either end, and the area between was filled in with dirt. Gary and Charles Barkhouse arrive at the Isaacs Point Beach, the Elephant's Nose Trunk area, which is the most eastern spot on the island. They will be metal detecting there due to the previous mentioned erosion caused by harsh storms during the winter off-season. Laird will later point out that Isaacs Point is a stone's throw from Smith's Cove. Gary explains to Charles and us that he's waving his metal detector coil horizontally on the bank because it doesn't just detect below the coil but above as well. Also, it detects a few inches from outside of the coil. He's using a coil that can detect metal buried up to 2 feet deep. Gary thinks his first detection is a coin after seeing a round end, but it's a 12 gauge shotgun shell. He says that's why it's called a treasure hunt. You have to hunt for the treasure. The next find is a fancy design button. He thinks it's silver. Gary dates it 1650 to 1750. Rick, Craig, and Steve are in a raft in the swamp. Steve provides the exact location of one end of the ship-shaped anomaly using his GPS receiver, and Tony begins probing the area, hitting something hard and saying it's perhaps a road or walkway. He says there are two levels, one about 2 feet lower than the other. Tony grabs a rock from below. It is extremely flat. The far end of it produces a rock that looks almost exactly the same. Tony then marks the boundary with these buoys. It appears to be a straight line, which usually indicates man-made. He says the higher level feature, which is more like a platform, is 6 to 8 feet from the buoys towards the top of the triangle-shaped swamp. Steve will plot out the structures and combine them with the seismic survey data. Gary and Charles arrive at the research center where Rick and other members of the team are already assembled. The lower card in the bag indicates that the silver button was found May 13th, 2019. The button has a starburst design on it. Laird is a little more recent with his guess on date, 1720s to 1770s, but that does still predate the 1795 discovery of the money pit. It also points out that it's not from a mold, it's handcrafted, with the starburst design being carved. They will get it cleaned and conserved, which will hopefully reveal a maker's mark that would indicate where it was made and give the exact year. Marty Lagina arrives on the island and goes with Rick to the war room where diver Tony Sampson and members of the team will receive Steve Gupta's plotting on the new swamp data. The paved stone swamp wharf, as labeled here, but will come to be called the paved area most often, is 2 meters or 6.5 feet from the ship-shaped anomaly. Notable but not discussed is the mercy point of the Tree of Life plotted using the stones of Nolan's Cross as a basis. The plan is to drill boreholes into the ship-shaped anomaly, which is buried under the bottom of the swamp. The desired result would be to find ship timbers in the core samples. Tom Nolan and members of the team meet at the swamp to await the equipment that will be used by Choice Drilling. Tom says his father Fred would be really excited about this because he spent a lot of time in the area of the anomaly. The peninsula to the right of the anomaly was built by Fred as a way to get further into the swamp without diving in. After the decades-long feud with Dan Blankenship, Fred Nolan agreed to work with the team in the last year of his life. Tom has cooperated to date, but this season has joined the team. The 5-ton drill rig will be on an 800-square-foot barge held in place as shown. As conservator Kelly Barassa gets to work on the button, Gary returns to Isaac's Point, this time with Marty's son Alex. Gary detects this likely searcher-owned hand mirror frame further inland, in which the trees have recently thinned out to aid in searching. Back out at the Isaac's Point beach, Gary detects this and forge iron spike. The button is so corroded that Kelly could not do much with it, but did manage a little cleaning. He confirms Laird's approximate date range, but says the design was made with a stamp, not carved. The rare shot of the episode shows Isaac's Point being in that stone's throw of Smith's Cove, where the sheep piling dam has remained in place through the off-season. A 100-foot section behind the slipway will be moved out an additional 50 feet to allow for more excavation. that will give the team access to a 6,000 square foot area that has 0 documented searcher activity. Rick and Gary meet Carmen Legg for the first time after traveling to New Ross, 20 miles northwest of Oak Island. He says the spike is a hand tool hit with a wooden mallet for carving rocks, and he Carmen dates it anywhere from 1300s to 1700s. He taps it with another piece of iron to hear how hard it is. He determines that it's very hard and could possibly have manganese content, which usually means it's older. Many carved stones have been found on Oak Island, including the 90-foot stone from the Money Pit. Back in the swamp, the drill rig on the barge is put in place using Steve Guptill's GPS coordinates. Tom Nolan arrives to watch the drilling start. I'll be continuing retro no-cap recaps of seasons 7 and 8 of The Curse of Oak Island during the summer and fall. All of the other episodes are already done and are in my Oak Island playlist. I'm also doing retro no-cap recaps of seasons 1 through 4 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Season 5 recaps are all done and are in the Skinwalker Ranch playlist. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment. Sempre avanti.